Good evening. How are you doing? I'm pretty tired. This was the end of my work week. It's felt like a very long work week between the doctor visits, watch yesterday's video, and a lot of people at work this week were just like in and out of work. So I got my stuff done. I got my stuff. Don't worry about me. But it felt weird this week. It felt like I couldn't get things done until I talked to people, and then they weren't available, and it was just kind of a weird feeling week. Anyway, today I discovered a big anniversary. Today is the 50th anniversary of the very first album of King Crimson. So basically their debut. So basically the band is 50 years old. Whatever. I'm sure they started playing music before they made an album, but still. And this is an interesting one for me because I didn't really listen to them until like a couple years ago. But I've known about them my whole life because I've heard about how many other bands mention them as an influence. In that way, it's kind of like David Bowie. Like, I didn't grow up listening to David Bowie music, but every band that I loved said they loved David Bowie. So I was like, okay, I guess it's pretty cool. And I don't know. I don't really know his music that well. And same with King Crimson. Again, when you're a kid in the 80s and 90s and you just hear people talk about King Crimson, it's not easy to go out and listen to it, you know? It requires money, and, you know, if a CD is $20, you're not necessarily going to buy a CD just because you heard about it from a band, you know? And the radio stations I listened to in the 90s were very much about rock music. And even though they played, you know, the classic rock, I don't remember any rock stations that I ever heard play any King Crimson or mention King Crimson. So it was kind of this weird thing where it's a name I knew, but I didn't know their music. And then you go forward a few years later, and I really hear about them a lot from Tool. Tool's my favorite band for a long time. They're still kind of my favorite. I definitely like the new album. I made a whole video about that when that came out. Tool definitely mentioned them being King Crimson fans. At one point, Tool and King Crimson went on a tour together, so I was like, oh, that's neat. Okay. They went on tour with their favorite band. That's awesome. And yet still, I didn't look into it. So a couple years ago, after I read a lot of JoJo, and of course, JoJo Part 5, which the anime just ended, the bad guy is basically called King Crimson, which is a really cool name. He's got a cool stand. I came upon myself where, you know, here in Japan, it's real easy to go to a store and you basically rent. You can rent CDs in Japan. You can't rent video games, but you can rent CDs. So I went to the store and I rented the only 3 King Crimson albums I could find, which were apparently the first 3. And I came home and I put them in and I played them. And the first album, which is called In the Court of the Crimson King. Boy, it's hard to say. And I just thought it was beautiful. You know, it's kind of a rock album, but it's kind of gentle. It really takes its time. The tracks are kind of long. I think the whole album is only like 6 songs. And, you know, I forget what it was, but years ago, some webcomic or something compared progressive rock to like a pizza, but it's got like 50 toppings on it. Like it's just covered in toppings. Anything you possibly want is on there. And that's how I kind of feel listening to that first album, King Crimson. Like it's definitely got some guitars, and you know they're pushing a little bit. Like the very first song kind of rocks out, but then it slows down again, and then it picks up, then it slows down again, and it just I really enjoy it. There's definitely some mornings where I've decided, you know what, I'm not going to listen to a podcast this morning. I'm just going to listen to as much of In the Court of the Crimson King as I can possibly listen to before I get to work. And it fills with a good feeling, you know? It's kind of like it's emotional, it's a little bit uplifting, but it's not like pumped up. Like I wouldn't want to work out to King Crimson. So it's definitely good for like a train ride, you know? You're going somewhere. Yeah, just listen and groove out. I'm sure if I was still that kind of person. And let's face it, this album came out in 1969. I would have been that person in 1969 had I been alive. Like, this definitely seems like a great album to like just sit down and like smoke a big bag of weed and just like listen to the whole album by yourself. Like that's, and I feel that way about the new Tool album too. Like if I had the means, I would just sit down and listen to this entire album by myself, getting high. That's the kind of vibe I get from it. And I apologize if that makes it sound lame, but you want to just live in that album and just be alone with it, you know? Not multitask, not random skip. Just like listen to the whole album and just get into it. So yeah, I really dig it. And I still have a lot to learn about progressive rock in general. And from what I can tell, King Crimson as a band, every album changes so much because the band members kept changing. Like a friend of mine, Retronauts dude, Jerry Parrish, he talked about how 80s King Crimson is completely different than 60s King Crimson and 70s King Crimson. That's right. I listened to some 80s because a lot of it's on Spotify now, so you can listen to like all their music from different eras, and it's weird. They just start shouting. It's like Talking Heads, but they're shouting more. But I kind of dig it. So, but in any case, the very first album, the very first band, which changed almost immediately if you look it up, it's 50 years old. It's a really good album. And if you have the internet, you can just go on the internet, listen to it. I recommend it. Anyway, it's bedtime. Good night, everybody.